Spoiler warning for these episodes in Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. It's not a surprise to hear that Toji Fushiguro is insanely strong. Despite having no cursed energy himself, we see him wipe the floor with powerful curses and Jujutsu sorcerers alike. The feats that Toji is able to perform are absolutely insane, and this got me thinking, just how strong is Toji Fushiguro? I don't mean in power scaling terms. I mean, what would it take in the real world to replicate the things that Toji does, and just how superhuman is he? What does it take for Toji to move gallons of water with a single swing? What does it take for him to run across water like it's his high school track? And what kind of power does it take for Toji to shatter a cement floor with a half-hearted kick? These are some of the questions I hope to answer in today's video. Again, we're not going to be talking about power scaling terms at all.
Uh-oh. Stinky.
We're not going to be comparing him to Goku, GRE Giorno, or even other JJK characters. Instead, we're going to try to find some numbers and comparisons that help us better understand just how strong Toji Fushiguro is. So first, a little bit of background for you rascals that ignored the spoiler warning. The reason Toji is able to perform at a superhuman level is due to something called a heavenly restriction. These are restrictions that are placed on a Jujutsu sorcerer at birth, and they affect their cursed energy in exchange for physical abilities or vice versa. For Toji, he was born with absolutely zero cursed energy, and in exchange, he was given superhuman strength, reflexes, and speed. Maki, one of the students at Jujutsu High, has a very similar restriction. She was born with the average level of cursed energy, and so in turn, her overall physical boost is a lot less than what Toji gets, but the principle is the same. An example of the reverse of their heavenly restrictions is Mekamura. He was born with a super frail and weak body, but in turn, he has an insane amount of cursed energy. The restriction placed on Toji tells us why he's so insanely strong, but it doesn't get us any closer to really understanding how strong he is. We're going to skip Toji's first appearances. While Toji's first fight against Gojo is a great one, there's not a ton of great reference points that we can deduce some real world numbers from. He does plenty of insane feats in that fight, like moving so fast that not even Gojo can track him, but it's hard to get a clear reference point in this fight. While the same is mostly true with Toji's fight against Geto, I wasn't super interested in researching the moments I felt like I could figure out fair numbers for in this fight. However, Toji's final appearances have a ton of great points that I thought I could extract some interesting information from. Let's start with Toji's day at the water park. Dagon is an extremely powerful special grade cursed spirit who has currently trapped Nanami, Maki, Nobito, and Megumi all inside his domain. Megumi's attempt to summon his own domain is the only thing keeping any of them alive, and so the group decides to use his domain to escape. Well, once Megumi opens a hole in his domain, Toji comes through instead, stealing away their opportunity to run. Toji is currently in a rage, hunting out the strongest opponent, and so his sights turn towards Dagon. I love the intro to this episode and how well it sets up the coming beatdown. The monologue paired with Toji's intimidating and insane presence really puts this intro over the top for me. The first moment we're going to talk about is right at the start of the fight. Dagon launches an eel at Toji, and Toji retaliates with a swing so powerful it strips the eel down to its bone, and more importantly, it splits the water around them like the Red Sea. As someone who owns a fish tank and has had to move that tank a number of times, I can tell you that water is fucking heavy. The fact that Toji is able to move so much water with a single swing is the first superhuman moment that we're going to look into. Before we're able to find a good comparison that shows off how strong Toji truly is here, we're going to need to first find out how much water he's moving in this scene, and before we can do that, we need to find out the volume of said water.
The biggest challenge for us here is figuring out the scale. The perspective and all the frames building up to Dagon's eel attack changes quite frequently. The exact distance that Dagon and Toji are apart isn't always the same either, and neither is Dagon's distance from the shoreline. With this in mind, we're just gonna have to pick some frames to run the numbers off of. The frames I chose to use for our reference take place during the attack and during Toji's follow-up. These moments are where the scaling is the most consistent in this little spat. We can see in these two frames here that Dagon is pretty much at the shoreline during the attack. We're going to use Dagon's location as the endpoint for the water. The other endpoint is just behind Toji as we see in this shot here, but calculating that distance is going to be challenging due to the angling and scaling in all of the frames.
I tried a number of different ways to deal with the odd perspective here, but none of them really worked out. First, I tried to figure out the distance by trying to figure out the length of the eel. The idea was that I could go in and count all of the spinal cord bits in this sequence and then get a rough estimate of the distance that way. The issue issue is the vertebrae were frequently obscured, their individual size and shape changes a lot, and it would be pretty much impossible to get a really exact count of how many vertebrae made up this eel's spine in this scene due to the way that it's animated. I thought maybe calculating the exact length of Playful Cloud could help us here and we could use it as a reference point, but then I realized mid-math that it wouldn't be any different from me just using Toji's height as a reference, which would be much easier. But then I also realized that neither method fixes our issue with the perspective and angle and all of that crap. Finally, I stumbled across an algorithm that has the ability to calculate distance in situations like these on photos, but even though my background is in computer science, I didn't know how to implement it. So we're just gonna ignore that perspective issue and just go with the Photoshop ruler. I should say that this is the only time in the video that we're just going to ignore an issue like this. All the other moments we explore have much more concrete math behind them. The Photoshop ruler allows you to set the scale based on the pixel length, so I do that using Toji as the setup. Toji is 6'1", and in this shot he's crouching down. I myself am 6'1", and when I crouch in a similar way to Toji in this shot, I'm just over 6 inches shorter. So using the height of 5'5" for Toji's current height in this shot, we can calibrate the ruler and then figure out that from just behind Toji until Dagon's feet is around 40 feet. This number isn't perfect. Again, we have the perspective and scaling issues, but it's honestly not that bad, and it's still going to help us get an answer of just how much water weight Toji is moving here. Good enough. Next.
Thankfully, the width of our area is going to be much easier to figure out thanks to this frame. The perspective here is just much easier to work with. The shot isn't angled, Dagon and Toji are much closer together, and honestly there are tons of great references we could use to get the scale in this picture. While working on that math that I ended up not using on that previous section when I was trying to figure out how long Playful Cloud was in total, I did manage to find out that each bar segment was around 28 inches. I got to this number due to the Wikipedia page on the 3-segment staff and due to the math I previously mentioned. Using this and the Photoshop ruler, we can figure out our width pretty easily. The ruler is going to give us a much better conclusion here due to the flat perspective and much closer together scaling of this frame.
First, I calibrated the ruler using Playful Cloud as a reference, and then I measured the sea floor. I should also note that I measured the width of the ground right under Playful Cloud, so that way the scaling in the frame does not affect our measurements for this one. In the end, the width of the area Toji blasts away is 31.6 feet wide. One more piece of the puzzle to figure out: the depth of the water. This might sound challenging, but honestly, we have some really solid references to go off that can give us some super clear numbers.
The water isn't a constant depth across the whole area. As we established, Dagon is by the shoreline and Toji is out in the water. We can see from these shots here that the water goes up to the midpoint in Toji's calf when he takes his swing against the eel. I'm the same height as Toji, so I went ahead and measured my own leg. My mid-calf length is around 14 inches, so Toji's standing in about 14 inches of water here. The water depth up at the shoreline is 0 because it's the shoreline. Using the shoreline as 0.1 and Toji's depth as 0.2, we can get a reasonable estimate of the total amount of water being moved here. We're going to assume that the water depth changes at a constant gradient because we really have no other choice. Surprisingly enough, there's not a topographical map of Dagon's domain on the JJK wiki. Dog shit franchise for that one. So we're going to be using the gradient. One important note here is that Toji's depth is not the end of our line. According to our Photoshop references from earlier, Toji is about 36 feet away from Dagon, and there's about 4 feet of water behind Toji that gets blasted up as well. That's how we got our total of 40 feet from earlier. This means that Toji's depth is just a point across our line. In order for us to figure out the true total depth, we need to figure out the depth of the water at the end of the line, behind Toji.
We're going to use a formula here that I bet 95% of you watching will know from school. It's the formula for finding the slope of a line. Say it with me now. Y equals mx plus b. We already know most of the variables needed in order to find out what our y, or the depth of the water, is. I'm going to place the shoreline depth at 0, 0 on the graph. This makes our math easy and makes sense logically speaking. Because of this, our b in our equation will just be a 0. The x in our equation represents the distance from the shoreline in feet. with m being the rate of change that takes place in the depth across our linear gradient. We don't quite know what our slope is yet, but using Toji's depth as a reference point, we can figure that out. Y in Toji's scenario turns into negative 14 inches and x would be 432 inches. After some basic algebra, we can then determine that our m, or the slope of the line, is going to be negative 0.032407, it just goes on like that. What that means is that for every inch further we move towards Toji from the shoreline, the water depth will increase by 0.032407 of an inch. Using that, we can finally determine what the depth is behind Toji. Plugging in our slope, 480 inches for our total distance gets us a deepest water depth of 15.5 inches.
Finally, we're able to calculate the volume of the water that Toji moves here. I might be doing this a little bit unorthodox, not gonna lie. There are formulas out there for finding the volume of a square-based pyramid, but I don't think that's gonna work for us. In all of the theoretical examples for this I saw online, they all used a square-based pyramid with 4 triangle sides, whereas our shape has 2 rectangular sides to it. So I thought the best way to find this shape's volume was just to change the shape. The theoretical shape that we're trying to find the volume of for our water calculations is pretty much just a rectangle, except it's cut diagonally instead of horizontally or vertically. Understanding this, we can use our dimensions from before to change our shape to a rectangle and find the volume of that much easier. Using width times length times height, we're able to get a volume for our rectangle of 2,882,000 cubic inches. This result is the volume for our theoretical rectangle, but we want the volume for our diagonal slice out of the rectangle. For this, we simply divide that volume by 2. I'm also changing the units to feet to make it more understandable. In the end, Toji is moving around 117,500 cubic feet of water in this one attack against Dagon.
In terms of weight, we need to figure out if it's saltwater or freshwater, and no, I'm not gonna spend a full another page on this fucking detail. I know you were all looking forward to that. I'm sorry. I think it's very clearly saltwater due to the presentation of Dagon's domain. It's very much a tropical island in the middle of the ocean. I find it very unlikely that it's a big old freshwater lake and not the ocean. Saltwater is 64 pounds per cubic foot, meaning that Toji is moving 7.5 million pounds of saltwater with this single swing. While that number is already insane, we're gonna take it one step further. To calculate the force needed to do what Toji does, we just have to use a simple formula. Force equals mass times acceleration. We've already figured out the mass of the water, but now we need to figure out what type of acceleration is going on here.
The force we're going to calculate is the force needed to move all of the water, and in order to do that, we need to figure out how high the water goes and how fast it gets there. Using the same methods and reference frames from earlier, I found that the waves around Toji and Dagon range from anywhere to 8 to 18 feet. For our math, we're going to take the average of 13 feet. To calculate the acceleration of the water, we need to figure out how fast it gets pushed up. In these side shots of the blast, we can see that the water takes around 3 frames to go from an unformed wave to a fully formed wave at its peak height. Assuming that this is animated at 24 frames per second tells us that it takes around 1/8 of a second for a wave to reach peak height. The final thing we need before we can calculate the water's acceleration is the water's velocity. Velocity is just a fancy word for speed, and using the numbers we got earlier, we can figure out that the water is moving at around 104 feet per second. Specifically, this means that the water is moving upwards at 71 miles per hour in the moments after Toji's force hits it. Finally, we can calculate our acceleration and then the force.
Use the force, Luke.
The acceleration formula is pretty simple, and it gives us a result of 832 feet per second or 567 miles per hour. Keep in mind that while these numbers are crazy, they're not as crazy as you might think. I did these calculations based on the 1/8 of a second that it takes for each individual wave to get pushed up to its peak. Did somebody say peak? Most of the water doesn't go past our average of 13 feet, so in most scenarios, this is the limit of energy that those water droplets ever feel. Another note, but about the force we're about to calculate, is that the amount of force that we're going to get isn't a representation of the amount of impact felt on every individual hit, but rather it represents the cumulative amount of force needed to move all of the water that he moves in the way that he does. I think. Not a physicist, doing my best here. Anyway, The cumulative amount of force needed to move the literal millions of pounds of seawater that Toji moves the way he moves it is 862,710,915 newtons of force. Big number. What the fuck does that even mean? You ever heard of a show called... Yeah, stupid name. I can clearly see him. Major spoilers for the ending of season 1 coming up. Skip to this time code if you want to avoid that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, great. There is an iconic scene in a fight against Omni-Man. Mark is getting beat to shit by his father, and one of the most brutal moments in that fight is when Omni-Man holds his son in front of an oncoming train. We're not going over my fucking math on this one, but the moment where Mark gets hit by that subway train, he's hit with 41,061,721 newtons of force. Now another note, this is not a perfect comparison. This is the amount of newtons that Mark would feel when the train hits him head on the first time. The numbers we got for Toji, on the other hand, represent the total newtons needed to move all of the water that Toji does and in the way that he does it. That said, this does just show you how many newtons 862,710,915 is. Getting hit by a 45-minute subway train doesn't even come close to that amount of newtons. So what about a better example?
We need to convert our units one more time. Technically 2. I'm sorry. Not really. Fuck you. 1 gram of TNT produces about 4,000 newtons of force according to this paper from Caltech. We can convert our newtons to joules using this formula I got from a NASA paper for high schoolers. It's like a worksheet and it has an explanation on how to convert newtons to joules on it. While this document is meant for high schoolers, I'm literally pulling it off of nasa.gov, so I think we can trust the math here. We need to convert our newtons into newton meters, and according to this paper, Newton meters convert to joules 1 to 1. To get Newton meters, we need to multiply our newtons by the distance that our object traveled, in this case, the distance that our water moved. We already have the distance that our water traveled due to our height calculations from earlier, but that needs to be in meters, so we're converting our 13 feet to 3.95 meters and multiplying our force by that number. This gets us a result of 3,407,708 and 114 Newton meters. These convert 1 to 1 to joules according to that NASA document, and so in the end, the total amount of joules in Toji's blast is almost 3.5 billion joules in total. TNT wise, we can do some quick maths with that 4,000 joules number from earlier. Those quick maths tell us that it would take around 851,927 grams of TNT in order to produce the same amount of joules. That number is kind of hard to visualize, so let me give you an easier one. Converting our TNT numbers from grams to pound gives us an answer of 1,878 pounds of TNT. That's almost a literal ton of TNT needed to replicate what Toji can do with a single swing.
If you wanted to replicate this in the real world, you need to string almost a literal ton of TNT across a 40-foot distance in order to mimic the effect we see here. Let's look at this clip from Mythbusters before we move on. In this clip, the Mythbuster boys are blowing up an empty mail van as a control test for a myth they're busting. They use 84 pounds of TNT on the van, and this is the result. According to my math, you need to string 22 bundles of TNT of this same size and throw them into Dagon's domain in order to replicate what Toji does with one single swing. Whew! That took a while to figure out. However, we're not done with this fight yet. We've got one other thing to check out and break down. Before that, I want to say if I've gotten or get anything wrong, please be nice about it. This is my first time doing a video like this, and so if I've misunderstood any of the physics concepts or gotten any of the math wrong, please understand I'm doing my best. I'm more than happy to receive some constructive criticism, just be nice. I do want to do more videos like this in the future, so subscribe for that. The other type of videos I do are video essay type shit, so go check those out as well. The final part in this fight I wanted to break down was Toji running on water for the majority of the fight. In some shots, it's not entirely clear if he's on the sand bed or in the water, but in most of the shots, it's pretty obvious that Dagon is floating above the water. The water is obviously very deep, or we can just clearly see that Toji is running across the water's surface. This shot in particular was my favorite favorite in the fight. So what's it going to take to run on water? Well, while the answer is still superhuman, it wasn't as fast as I was expecting, honestly. I knew from watching Mythbusters back in the day that running on water was indeed a myth. Humans are just too heavy and dense to run on water without a lot more power behind us. However, I had never really looked into what it would actually take to run on top of water in theory. And so I got to researching.
First, I wanted to look into the study that looks at exactly what point humans could run on water. The study is called Humans Running in Place on Water at Simulated Reduced Gravity, and it was published in July of 2012. In the study, the researchers hoisted up participants in a suspension system that essentially worked to reduce their effective gravity. The participants also wore these weird fins on their feet that made their feet shaped more similar to the Jesus lizard's feet. Then the participants would try to run across the water's surface. No one was successful at running on water until they were testing at a fifth of Earth's gravity, and even then only a few participants managed to run on the water's surface. Here's a clip of one of their tests, by the way. It's extremely funny and you all need to see it. While this study is not one-to-one with our situation, we can definitely get some perspective from it. After I checked out this study, I checked out some more articles in order to get some more information. For one, there's this article on Science Focus written by Len Fisher. I kind of assumed that Len was a woman, so when I looked them up and I saw this guy, I laughed. My bad, bro. He's a physicist, so I think we can take his numbers here pretty seriously for our problem. However, he does do his calculations on someone who weighs 75 kilograms, whereas Toji is closer to 90 kilograms, so we're gonna have to scale his results up. I'm not a physicist myself, and Len doesn't really show his work here, so when we scale it up, I am kind of gonna be guessing. However, my scaled up guess is not going to be our final answer, but a step along the path. We'll have a more exact answer in a minute. Len's conclusion is that someone weighing 75 kilograms would have to run at least 85 kilometers per hour in order to stay on top of the water's surface. He even says that that's a generous guess because he's ignoring a lot of forms of drag in his equation. With Toji being 15 kilograms heavier, we can scale up Len's conclusion by a similar amount. So for Toji, we're looking at around 100 to 120 kilometers per hour in order to run on the water's surface. I want to emphasize that Len says he's being generous here, and I think that's really true due to our final calculations we're about to get, because spoiler, it's faster than 120 kilometers an hour. The second article we're looking at is from fluiddynamics.com. It's titled Humans Running on Water, and it was written by Nicole Sharp. I looked her up as well, and she's an aerospace engineer, so I feel pretty comfortable trusting her numbers here. She is far smarter than me. So is Len, to his credit. Sorry again, Len. Nicole's research and article helps us reach our final conclusion when it comes to Toji's Jesus Joyride. We learn from her article that there are two superhuman movements needed. First, you must hit the water with a certain amount of force and speed, and second, you must be able to maintain a certain amount of forward momentum. Now, Nicole goes over her own calculations and numbers in her article, but this queen actually provides us with a calculator where we can apply our own numbers and get more specific and refined results for our specific situation.
In the calculator, I upped the weight variable to 90 kilograms. For the foot area size, I went with a size 11 foot because that seems to be about the average shoe size for people 6'1". I'd like to take a little bit of time here and note that I'm the same height as Toji and I wear size 13s. You know what they say about people with big feet? For the foot depth on the calculator, I went with 1/10 of a meter. This variable means how deep the feet are sinking into the water with every step. In the anime, it's pretty clear that Toji is running on the surface of the water, and so I made the foot depth smaller compared to what Nicole uses in her own calculations. Putting the foot depth all the way at 0 felt wrong because I assumed the animators didn't animate his foot pushing into the water slightly for visual reasons and nothing more. So I'm just going to reduce the foot depth instead of going all the way to 0 to meet a sort of middle ground. I don't need to oversell Toji's insane feats because they are already superhuman. If I have to make a choice or an assumption for anything in this video, I'm going with the middle ground to keep things as fair and balanced as possible. That's another reason why I'm not going with a foot depth of 0. Finally, for the time needed to take a step, I went with the same number as Nicole. 0.15ths of a second, or in more understandable terms, that's just faster than a top sprinter according to Nicole in her article.
With all of the numbers plugged in, we get some pretty crazy results. According to this calculator, Toji's feet would have to hit the water at a speed of 62.9 meters per second, or 226 kilometers an hour. We also learned that his forward momentum would need to be 188.2 kilometers per hour. Now I'll be honest, these numbers, They mean nothing to me. In order for me to understand these numbers, I need them in goddamn American English. I just genuinely can't visualize scale in the metric system. So Toji's feet have to hit the water's surface at 140 miles per hour, and he needs to keep a forward momentum of 117 miles per hour. Out of everything we've looked at, I find this last set of numbers the most compelling due to us being able to input exact details on Toji's size and height for our calculations. So congrats, Nicole. You wrote a better article than Len. Sorry again, Len.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
Let's put those numbers in perspective before we move on to the other fight that we're going to look at. Easy one first. The forward speed of 117 miles per hour is pretty easy for most of us to visualize. I've definitely never driven that fast in my life. Never, ever once. I am sure that most watching have driven 70 to 80 miles per hour on the highway before, so it's not that hard to visualize going that much faster. For a real world example, Toji is running half as fast as a peregrine falcon can dive. Wait, what? He's slower than a fucking bird? Cancel the video. He's fucking weak! A weak loser! A better comparison to speed here is a skydiver. A skydiver falling with their stomach parallel to the ground will fall at about 120 miles per hour. That's the same speed that Toji would need to be running here in order to stay above the water. The more interesting part of the equation is the speed at which Toji's feet have to hit the water. Using all of the math shit from earlier, we can calculate just how much force Toji is generating each time his feet hit the water. Each footstep would be hitting with 5,867 newtons of force. If you remember from our TNT example from before, a gram of TNT has around 4,000 newtons of force in it. So every step that Toji takes is creating the same amount of force as a gram and a half of TNT. Well, we could in theory spend another 15 minutes breaking down other moments and aspects of Toji's fight against Dagon. I would like to jump ahead to Toji's final fight that takes place right after this one. Toji isn't exactly in his right mind in this final fight. He's not really alive at this point in the show, and he's only in Shibuya due to another curse user summoning him using their technique. That technique should have ended when the vessel's cursed energy ran out, but Toji's body doesn't exert any cursed energy per his heavenly restriction. And so this just leaves Toji to run rampant. Toji's bloodlust has taken him over in this half-alive state, and so he's just searching out the strongest curse users in the area to fight. This leads him to singling out Megumi Fushiguro after the fight with Dagon. Megumi is singled out due to his access to the 10 Shadows technique. This technique gives him access to 10 different Shikigami, and it also lets him store things inside of shadows. Megumi at this point is already exhausted and has already used a significant portion of his cursed energy in the previous fight. This severely limits Megumi's capabilities in this fight. Once his battle against Toji begins, Megumi uses Rapid Escape in order to hopefully escape from Toji. He runs off into a skyscraper that's under construction, and Toji being Toji, he beats him there. Speaking of beatings, Megumi gets one before his rabbits rush in to help. This is the moment we're going to break down in this fight, and oh boy is there a lot to break down. Here, Toji obliterates the floor with a single kick and sends the rabbits flying. He then begins to flick debris at all of the rabbits around him, destroying them all in an instant. This sequence is obviously an insane feat of strength, but just how much force and speed is Toji exhibiting here? Let's start off with that powerful kick that shatters the floor. The floor here is more than likely reinforced concrete. First off, it looks like concrete, but that's not enough to just assume that it is. I did a little digging on the construction methods needed to build skyscrapers, and in that research I learned that concrete is definitely a major part of that process. For one, Wikipedia states that modern skyscrapers are built with steel or reinforced concrete frameworks. We all learned in English class that Wikipedia isn't the best source to solely rely on, so I found some other sources that can support it. The site Statistia. I have no fucking clue how to pronounce that. Anyway, they did a study on what construction materials are used in building skyscrapers over 200 meters, and their results made it very clear that concrete is definitely the favorite building material. One more source. Skyscrapers.org has an article about all these buildings and the way that they innovated the use of concrete in the skyscraper industry. With all of those sources, I think we're pretty safe in assuming now that it is a concrete floor that Toji is kicking here. So, how strong is the stuff? Well, it's literally used to build skyscrapers, so it's gotta be strong, but it's also not impossibly strong. There's a type of concrete called ultra high performance concrete, and it has a far higher strength when compared to normal concrete, but I honestly couldn't figure out the exact type of concrete used when building large buildings. From what I can tell, it varies. So for the sake of our comparison, we're just going to go with the strength of standard concrete for our upcoming calculations when plugging in the density of our concrete. Normal concrete has a density of 2,400 kilograms per meter cubed. From here, I thought the best way to figure out what it takes to make a crater like Toji does was by using a crater calculator from Purdue University. The people who made this calculator are literal physics researchers, so I think we can use these numbers pretty safely. I also think it's going to give us a great answer to understand just the kind of force that Toji's exerting here.
We're going to have to work a little backwards in order to get a good comparison for Toji's big kick. We know some of the factors used by the calculator already, like the density of the concrete and the outcome we're looking for, but we're missing some of the other variables. Since we know the outcome and we can't exactly algebra our way through this calculator, we're going to just guess on the one or two variables that we're missing until we get the outcome that we're looking for. The variables we're missing for the calculator is the speed of the object and what object is impacting the ground. The speed is what we're going to have to guess on until we get it right, but for the object impacting the ground as a comparison, I went with an iron cannonball. Before that though, we need the exact length of Toji's crater. In this frame, we can see the entire crater, and that crater is almost 7 Tojis across. The scaling and angles aren't perfect, but it is much better than the situation we dealt with at the beginning of the video. The length of the crater comes out to around 12.8 meters, and so we need the calculator to give us an output that's a crater with the size of around 12.8 meters. As stated before, I used a 6-inch iron cannonball as our impacting object in this representation. In order for that cannonball to make an impact similar to what Toji does here with a half-hearted kick, that cannonball would need to be moving at 7,158 miles per hour at the moment of impact. Toji's creating the same impact force as an iron cannonball moving faster than Mach 9. That's 9 times the speed of sound. Creating such a crater in the cement just proves how truly superhuman Toji is.
In my opinion, with all of this data we've been collecting, I think it's very fair to say that Toji plays with his prey a lot. He has these moments where he displays these insane feats of strength, and yet Megumi can just outrun him time and time again. I mean, he's barely getting away, but he is getting away. I get that Megumi is strong and he has a lot of untapped potential as well, but still. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Let's look at some guns. Toji's crater in the cement isn't where the insanity in this scene stops. In fact, it's just the beginning. Toji proceeds to flick pieces of debris at each of the rabbits around him, and the rabbits get absolutely obliterated by the debris. Assuming that Megumi's Shikigami have similar properties to their real-world counterparts, we can determine just how powerful Toji is launching the debris at the rabbits. I spent some time googling what it takes to blow up a rabbit for a bit, and surprisingly, there aren't really scientific studies where we can get that sort of information. Instead, I thought it would be best to compare guns and ballistic gel. Ballistic gel is a gel that's been designed to simulate what damage bullets do to animal flesh. The YouTube channel Kentucky Ballistics has this video where they shoot a 4-bore rifle into a pile of ballistic gel, and the chunks of gel they use are each about the size of a rabbit. The damage that bullet does to a chunk of ballistic gel would definitely be enough to destroy a rabbit. That gun is meant for hunting elephants, so it makes sense that it would obliterate a bunny. I thought this example was a bit ridiculous, so I kept looking for another gun that could get us the same results, but on a more reasonable level. This led me to a video by One Shot TV where they tested birdshot, buckshot, and shotgun slugs on a ballistic gel dummy. The bird and buckshot didn't really do that much damage. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to get shot by either, but for our purposes, the shotgun slug was the golden ticket. The slug decimates the ballistic gel dummy, and I think it's safe to say it'd do the same to a sweet little bunny. Toji is already insanely powerful, and we don't need to fluff up his numbers by going with the 4-bore rifle here. Being able to just flick debris with the strength of a shotgun slug is already superhuman enough. However, it gets even crazier. The scene goes back and forth from slow motion to real time, and in the real time sequences, Toji is going so fast that it's impossible to see him pretty much. It's very clear he's hitting more than just one piece of debris. So how many does he hit?
In the frames before Toji's kick and flick sequence, we can see a bunch of the rabbits running toward him. In those final frames before the kick and flick, I counted around 70 bunnies. In the frames after this sequence, we can see that all of the rabbits are destroyed. destroyed. With this, we can deduce that he's flicking anywhere from 60 to 70 pieces of shattered cement in this sequence. While this is useful information, it doesn't really come into perspective until you look at just how fast all of this happens.
Toji throws his cursed weapon, Playful Cloud, up in the air before starting his kick and flick sequence. We see in those same frames that we counted all the rabbits on that Playful Cloud starts its descent from up above. It's subtle and easy to miss, but if you go frame by frame, right at the end, it's clear that Playful Cloud starts to fall down before Toji even kicks the ground.
From some frames before, we can see here that there's around 2 stories of open space above Megumi and Toji. It's pretty impossible to tell just how high Playful Cloud gets thrown, so we're just gonna assume it goes all the way to the ceiling, or around 20 feet. After Toji finishes his brutal destruction, it takes a full second for Playful Cloud to fall back into his hand. With this information, we can figure out just how long it takes for Toji to kick the ground and obliterate the bunnies. I used a free fall calculator online and found out that it would take around 1.15 seconds for Playful Cloud to fall from its height. After the destruction, it takes a full second for Playful Cloud to fall back into his hand. We know from the shot up above where we counted the bunnies that Playful Cloud starts to fall before Toji kicks the ground. All of this means that all of that destruction takes place in less than a fifth of a second.
This means that within 0.2 of a second, Toji is kicking the ground with the same force as an iron cannonball moving at 9 times the speed of sound. He then proceeds to flick 60 to 70 pieces of debris with perfect accuracy, all with the same force as a shotgun slug. And he manages to do all of this in almost a literal blink of an eye. It was pretty obvious that Toji was very, very strong while watching JJK. But now, after diving in and breaking down a few of his feats of strength, I've come to understand just how truly, insanely strong he is. Superhuman.
He said it! He said it!
Obviously, it's an anime, and I highly doubt that JJK's author or any of the animators were spending time making sure that the art they were creating would mimic real-life physics and that kind of thing. Their logic was, Toji's strong, so let's make it clear that he's powerful. But I had fun looking into all of this and breaking it down, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. If so, check out one of my other videos. I would greatly appreciate it. Personally, I recommend checking out my Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video if you want to see what my video essays are like. Any constructive feedback on this video is greatly appreciated. I'm probably going to do more like this in the future. See you next time. Thanks again.
Don't you worry, it'll be okay. Don't you worry, spit and come, you make my life okay.